What's up, YouTube? This is going to be about John Travolta passing on American Gigolo, which went to Richard Gere. The interesting thing about this is that he would have teamed up with Deborah Winger. She had agreed to play the role, which went to Lauren Hutton. Talk about how small the world it is. And of course, Travolta and Winger both passed on this film, and they had done Urban Cowboy together. And then, of course, a year later with Officer and a Gentleman was going to be Winger and Richard Gere. So it's a carousel of circles and cycles of how people, a role here, a role there, they're in the same situation. Now, would they have been believable in American Gigolo compared to Urban Cowboy? No. Travolta had a New York style, but there was a certain type of metro vibe that's associated with the way Richard Gere was in American Gigolo that I couldn't quite see Travolta, even though he had a certain aura, but it was more New York chic. It was more, it wasn't like Richard Gere. They hit differently, and it's kind of funny when you look at stuff like that because the way they carry themselves. So when you're thinking about roles, now him and Lauren Hutton would have been interesting on the screen. I think Travolta with Lauren Hutton would have been compelling, but I don't know if it quite leads to the same thing with this though. It's a certain different type of aura and vibe. But Travolta and Deborah Winger, when they did Urban Cowboy, definitely worked in that particular situation. American Gigolo was a bit more raw, had a lot going on, a different totality. When I think about the Bill Duke character, for instance, I don't know how Travolta would have risen to that the way Richard Gere did with his character. So it's interesting when you watch those sort of things and how they kind of play off because those little nuances and what you're looking for as far as character and theatrics and timing. So, but it all adds up though. But it would have been interesting to say the least though. But when I saw this film, I thought, wow, that's interesting that it almost was a back-to-back for Deborah Winger and John Travolta. They had both passed that test and both had wanted to do the movie and the whole thing. Because at the time, he was a very happening actor. I mean, he was coming. The thing about it was he was doing all those musical type of movies and he was kind of limited. So he wasn't really seen in this stylish type of under type of world. And Deborah Winger was more geared, not quite in that kind of like Lauren Hutton. So, when you look at certain roles in movies, you got to ask yourself, would they have been able to pull that off? Would that have worked? Would that styling have worked? Thinking about it, because when I look at the movie and the flair,